So I just read Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. If I'm pronouncing that right, I'm not sure. I'm not really sure how Nigerian or Igbo names are pronounced. So this was recommended to me by someone on this channel as sort of a counterpoint to Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. So this book is more the history of colonization through the voice of one of those who was colonized, not one of the colonizers. And it's very short. Short books are great. So there's not really that complicated of a plot. It's the story of primarily this one man, Okonkwo, in southeastern Nigeria, I believe, one of the Igbo people, and about sort of his life as a member of his sort of society. And the first half of the book really goes into all sorts of different aspects of the society, the religion, the culture, the cuisine, the sort of daily life, the seasonal events, celebrations, births, deaths, funerals, marriages. And then near the very end of the book, we have the introduction of the colonizers, of a handful of white men. Then, of course, the story takes a really dark turn, and in the last handful of pages, we really see things fall apart. This sort of society loses basically all its autonomy and all its power, and just has to follow what these invaders, these colonizers decide, which is really heartbreaking. It shows how humans are sort of can use force and overwhelming physical power to literally force other people to do things that they don't want to do, which that sounds really silly, but having no autonomy, having everything taken away from you and being completely powerless to stop it, having your entire world destroyed, and the people who are destroying it are unrepentant and are doing so purely for economic reasons. They're just doing it to make more money, but maybe part of it is like a little bit of a sadistic control over other human beings. But the fact that they will sort of hide behind ideals of supposed civility or civilization and religion, sort of some of them believe that they're actually doing this for the benefit of the people of the colonized, but of course they're not. They're doing it for the sort of benefit of their own society, their own colonial empire back in Europe. But one thing I really like about this book is it really doesn't sugarcoat it. It's not like, oh wow, life was so great for everyone back in Nigeria before the British took over. No, it feels very, very true. It's a fictional story, but it feels very real. It's a very real book. It's not sugarcoating it. It's the society that sort of falls apart is one that is extremely patriarchal. The sort of main character, Okonkwo, he beats his wives on occasion. At one point he shoots at one of them and he misses, so she doesn't die. He also has to kill this young boy that he had been raising for 3 years, and he like chops him down with a machete. And like anytime twins are born, they throw the babies into the woods because that's seen as sort of an evil to have twins. So there's all sorts that is sort of, I want to say from my sociocultural perspective, wrong or evil. But I mean, I think even just universally, there are some things wrong and evil with this society. But that does not justify the colonization of this society. It does not justify the removal of these people's autonomy. But I do appreciate that this book doesn't sort of, how there is not good and evil. There is not, oh, these noble African tribes people, and they were destroyed by these horrible white men. No, there's even one of the white men, Mr. Brown, who described that he tries to understand these Igbo people. He speaks with them. He gets them to communicate with him about their God, and he will tell them about his God, and tries to find common ground, and they sort of have rational arguments, rational discussions. And I mean, he's still a colonizer and he's still doing kind of bad things, but the book, it does a good job of presenting the story as if it feels historical, and I guess you could call it historical fiction. It does not feel like there's, I don't want to say an agenda, because like all writing has some purpose behind it, but yeah, it's very real. And so it was published in 1958, and it was written by an Igbo man in Nigeria. So, and it takes place in sort of the late 19th century, the sort of scramble for Africa when the British colonized Nigeria. And so that from like, 1870s, 80s, 90s to the 1950s, that's not that huge of a leap in time. Like, the writer would have known people who wouldn't necessarily have grown up during the colonization, but he would have known people who would have known firsthand accounts of what had happened. And also, I think it's close enough in time that there would have been some remnants of that that culture. And I'm sure there still are today remnants of the pre-colonial culture. That gives the book a very, again, more sort of realism to it, despite it being a work of fiction. So yeah, the main character Okonkwo, he's this man that, like, he's got huge daddy issues. His father was very lazy and did not work hard and sort of did not attain high status in his society, and so the son was just rebelling against that and became a super hard worker and had this, like, he's sort of the epitome of this idea of toxic masculinity. So Okonkwo has this idea of what it is to be masculine and man and a warrior, and reject anything womanish or cowardly. And yeah, so like I said, he beats his wives and his children because he wants them to sort of be like him and not like his father. And because of his extreme work ethic, he manages to become a wealthy, influential man in his society. And in a sort of a neighboring village, one of the people from his village had been there and had been killed. And so they're going to declare war, but they say, we will not declare war if you send us a girl in return for the woman that you married, and also a boy. And so that village decides to do that in lieu of war. And this boy gets then raised by Okonkwo. And he lives with Okonkwo for 3 years, and Okonkwo starts to see this boy as another son. But unfortunately, because he's not of the tribe, after 3 years, the elders of the village decide, for whatever reason, that the boy has to die. They're gonna sacrifice the boy, and they sort of tell Okonkwo, like, you're kind of a father to him. Don't be involved in the actual killing of him. But of course, he's like, no, I'm a man. This is a manly thing. I'm not going to shy away from this. And so he's the actual one that kills this boy. And he is sort of like, I mean, as you would be, he's not a psychopath. He is affected by it, but he gets over it and moves on with his life. The next sort of big event in his life is they are at a funeral ceremony, and I think he has his gun that he's firing during this sort of ceremony, and it like explodes, or a piece of shrapnel hits a 16-year-old boy and kills the boy. And because he's committed essentially manslaughter, he's killed someone, but it was not, I believe they describe it as the woman and not the man, or the female and not the male or something. So it wasn't an intentional murder, it was an accidental murder. He is banished or exiled from the village for only 7 years instead of for life. And so he's built up sort of kind of estate, this big farm, this big family, and now he has to abandon all of that for 7 years. And so he does. He leaves for 7 years. He goes back to the village that his mother's from and stays there. And over this 7-year period, that's when the sort of the English start to move up into the interior of this region, and start in Okonkwo's original village, building a church and building law courts and administrative buildings and stuff. And so this exile is sort of a convenient plot device to sort of not have a time skip, but sort of pull Okonkwo out of the society and then put him back in 7 years later and have him witness to all these changes. And at this point, when he does return, it's seen that it's sort of too late to change, too late for things to go back the way they were. And he regrets that he wasn't there to sort of fight against this. And conflicts, of course, are occurring between the white. So there's like one white man who's like a pastor of this church, and he has a whole bunch of other converts that are not from the village but are like Africans. And he also has converts from this village, and one of them is Okonkwo's oldest son. And that just sort of, it doesn't break Okonkwo's heart. It hardens his heart, and he becomes really mad and sort of disinherits this boy and refuses to speak of him and curses him. But they sort of describe how the boy sees this new religion, this Christianity, as clearing up some of the issues he had with things like why do we abandon twins to die? Why do we kill like the boy that grew up with him that he saw as an older brother that his father then had to kill? Why did that boy have to die? And things like that sort of led this boy to Christianity. And the book kind of climaxes when, because of some conflicts, the people of the village rise up and destroy the church, burn the church down, which leads to the sort of colonizers coming in and saying, hey, who are the leaders of your village? Come, we're going to have a chat. And they're like, okay, we'll have a meeting, we'll talk this out. And then they just arrest them and hold them for ransom. And then when they do ransom these guys, Okonkwo being among them, he's just like so angry, right, naturally. And so they finally have a big get together with the whole village meeting to sort of like, what are we going to do? And as they're meeting, some representatives from the sort of colonizers come, and it's not explicitly stated, but I believe that the spokesperson from this is Okonkwo's eldest son. And so Okonkwo, in a rage, draws his machete and kills what I believe to be his son. He does this because he wants to have a war. He's like, we need to have a war. We need to be warriors and stand up and push out these intruders. But the rest of the village does not feel the same way. And when he kills the spokesperson, they allow the others to flee back. And he knows that his village has sort of given up. They're not going to be united enough to wage a war. And so then he goes and hangs himself. And that's how the book ends, with one of his friends taking these colonizers to his body, because they have come to sort of arrest him for killing this man, and saying, like, he was the best of us. He was like the epitome of what it is to be one of these Igbo people, and you drove him to kill himself. And because he killed himself, like, we're not even allowed to bury him properly because it's a crime to kill yourself and whatnot. Yeah, it gets very, very dark and very, very hopeless, and very quickly near the end of the book. So I do recommend it to anyone who wants to know anything about, I mean, I don't want to say African culture, because that's sort of ridiculous to say African culture. There's hundreds and hundreds of African cultures, but to sort of see, if not firsthand, then a fictionalized account of what it would be like firsthand to be colonized, and to have that sort of feeling of hopelessness and powerlessness as you realize that the world that you've known and that your family and ancestors have known forever is being destroyed, and there's absolutely nothing anyone can do about it. Yeah, so that is Things Fall Apart. Very good book.